To this meeting of South Ribble Borough Council's Community and External Scrutiny Committee. I'm Councillor Matt Campbell, Chair of the committee, and we'll do introductions in a moment. We have committee members in the Civic Centre along with officer support. The meeting is being live streamed via YouTube and will be available on the Council's website. Some housekeeping for those in the Civic Centre. There are no fire drills planned, and if the alarm goes off, please leave by the emergency exits at the back of the room and congregate on the car park. Please turn mobile phones off and switch your microphones off when not speaking. For those joining us via Microsoft Teams, please remain muted and indicate at the appropriate time when you would like to speak, and I will bring you in. We are very grateful to our guests for attending tonight's meeting. We will now do introductions. So I'm Chair of the committee and I'm Ward Councillor for Walton Dale West.
Good evening, I'm Councillor Pritchard and Vice Chair of the Committee and Ward Member for Lostock Hall.
Good evening, I'm Councillor Joan Burrows and I'm the elected member for Middleford Ward.
Good evening, I'm Councillor Keith Martin from Middleford as well.
Good evening, I'm Councillor Elaine Stringfellow and I'm a Ward Member for Lostock Hall.
Good evening, Councillor Hayden Williams and I represent Leyland Central.
I'm Matthew Pavlish and I'm a Democratic and Member Services Officer.
Hello, I'm Darren Cranshaw, Head of Democratic Services.
Thank you, everybody. Item 1, apologies for absence. We've received apologies from Councillor Lou Jackson and we have Councillor Elaine Stringfellow substituting today. Welcome this evening, Councillor Stringfellow. Item 2, declarations of interest. Any members have any interest to declare? No, thank you. Item 3, minutes of the last meeting held on Monday, 29th of September 2025. Is everybody happy to agree that that was a correct record of the meeting? Yes, thank you very much. Item 4, recommendations update. Members are asked to consider the update and agree to remove those recommendations that have been completed. Is everybody happy to do that? Yes, thank you very much. Item 5, Community Safety Partnership Update 2026. We're very happy to have Chief Inspector James Neal, Jennifer Mullen and Councillor Kath Unsworth here this evening. Please could you just introduce yourselves, give us a brief overview of what your job entails, and then we'll move on to questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, good evening. Yeah, my name's James Neal. I'm Chief Inspector. I cover Chorley, South Ribble and West Lancashire. So I have the neighbourhood team within my portfolio, as well as IOM, Safer Neighbourhoods team and task force. So we work quite closely together in terms of working on the CSP.
Hello, hi, I'm Jennifer Mullen. I'm the Director of Communities and Leisure and I'm here as the Chair of the Community Safety Partnership. So in my directorate is Community Safety and we work together on the Community Safety Partnership.
Good evening, Councillor Kath Unsworth, Councillor for Broadfield Ward and Portfolio Holder for Environment and Street Scene, which includes public safety.
Thank you very much. We'll move on to questions. So my question relates to page 16, paragraph 9. Reference is made to the partnership being dependent on collaborative working with Lancashire County Council. How effective is the collaboration with the County Council?
So the County Council support us quite a lot, particularly with road safety. So we work with Lancashire County Council on road safety work and delivering the work on speed and working with the Road Safety Partnership. We also work in collaboration with Lancashire County Council adult social care, particularly with our cases through the South Ribble integrated team. We also work with children's social care with regards to some of the support that we do for young people and families, and we also work with Lancashire County Council with work that we're doing on family support and support with diversion activities.
Thank you very much. How effective is the collaboration with other partner organisations that are mentioned in the report? And is there any organisations you'd like to build a better relationship with?
We really get excellent support in the Community Safety Partnership, and some particular support we're particularly grateful for is with the community sector and the faith sector that we work with, who's very much support and deliver and support us in our projects. So we do have the NHS as well as part of our partners, so we do have health partners. They're not consistently at the meeting. They do help and support on particular aspects of work, particularly domestic homicide reviews and some of the social care support. I know it's difficult for them, particularly with the time that they've got to concentrate on community safety. But we try and work with them as closely as we can. We've got particularly good relationships with the probation service and Lancashire Fire and Rescue, obviously with the police. And they do attend and do support us in delivery of some of our projects. So it's a very supportive relationship with the partners.
Hello, hi. Can I just ask how the partnership works with the community hubs within South Ribble, please?
Well, at the moment, I think that some of the community hubs will invite the neighbourhood policing to their meetings. I think you've also been to the chairs and vice chairs meeting as well to represent the police. So I think there's always an open invite to some of the hubs to come along. We will be producing information packs to each of the hubs, which will include crime data. So again, it's something that can be analysed. I'm not sure if there's anything further that you want to add with community police.
No, I do know we have that invite, and it is part of the regular patrol plans. So as closely as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah, thank you very much. It was really interesting looking at the figures for the wards and noticing where there was higher crime, notably Bamber Bridge East. And I just wondered where there is a specific spike or a specific increase, what could the hubs who cover that, it might not just be Bamber Bridge East, what could they do proactively to work with you using the data that they've got?
I mean, in terms of the hubs, the biggest thing we always need is information, either reporting or third-party reporting. So I know in some areas we don't necessarily get the volume of calls and the volumes of reports directly to us that we then use to allocate resources. However, they will fill a gap in terms of that, because they're the same as councillors will in terms of telling us what's actually happening. So it's another reporting mechanism in. And then after that, it depends very much on what the problems are in those areas. But the main ones are letting us know what those problems are so we can work together to come up with a plan.
Thank you. Oh, sorry,
I
Jonathan.
was just going to add, so particularly I know some of the hubs have worked on looking at diversionary activities. They've also looked at particular events in parks that the police have been invited to. Again, sort of public facing, meet your police officer. I know some of the councillors have organised chats with the police officers as well to come down and look at I don't know, is it coffee with a cop?
Yes,
is that what it's called still? So I think some of the councillors have really embraced that, and particularly in Bamber Bridge, where they've been liaising with the officers. Again, sometimes there's reluctance in the community to report, but they're happy to report to the councillor, who then reports it through to ourselves. So we've got weekly, the police have got weekly tasking meetings that our community safety team are present in. So sometimes the reports will not be made through the official channels, but they will be made anecdotally, so that we're able to, in those weekly tasking meetings, to say anecdotally we've had reports of, whether it's youth nuisance or whether it's something different, and we're able to then feed it through into the tasking meeting directly from some of the councillors in the community who've got that relationship.
Question as such, it's an observation really that Elaine and I cover Lostock Hall, and we know that there's a real lack of understanding in the community about reporting in general, and not just through to the police, but reporting in general, and they don't understand necessarily the difference between county and district authorities. And since becoming a councillor, I've realised this is quite a it really stops people from being able to actively take some responsibility, some ownership. We've struggled to think about how we can tackle that, apart from, you know, just producing some kind of directory which is really explicit. But there are examples where we've been working with our community policing team, and they've said to the community, oh, did you not, we could help you with that. And the community are just completely unaware. I'm thinking here about obstruction to driveways and things like that. And there's a real, at the heart of it, there's just a real lack of understanding of, well, that's a policing issue that I can report to, how to report it, and then a confidence in knowing that that's going to be picked up. It's just an observation, really. I don't think there's a particular answer to it, but you may have an idea.
No, absolutely. I appreciate that. That is one of the hurdles that we come across quite a lot. So we've got a couple of mechanisms for reporting. Obviously, if it's a crime, depending on the urgency, there's the 999, the 101, and the online reporting. But in terms of community concerns, we've also got Lancashire Talking, which is the online system that we use that's a two-way communication where people can complete surveys or report directly to us about those concerns they've got. We've also got the single online home, which is essentially it's just an email system, so they can report things like either non-crime issues or just to get in touch with the local neighbourhood team. So if there's, and what I would say is, especially if they're not sure if it's a crime but they want to speak to somebody about it, either Lancashire Talking is excellent, or the single online home, just to ask those questions, and we'll be able to point people in the right direction.
Yeah, Councillor Martin.
Thank you, Chair. Good evening. While we're concentrating on sort of like South Ribble hubs, obviously there's parish councils that get involved, and town council, Penworth particularly. I sort of wonder whether you start getting too many places you have to get to visit, or because I mean obviously we would like, or Penworth Town Council would like someone to attend as regular as possible, and then if we ask in the hub, would you not think you start getting an overlap or reporting of similar or same instances?
I suppose it depends. My instinctive answer is possibly not, because if it's been raised in all these situations, it's probably something we absolutely need to get a grip of. And if it's been raised separately, we probably need to make sure that we're updating people, which may be our issue. There is a lot of engagement opportunity, and obviously we're limited in terms of resources, but I certainly wouldn't say we've not got time to come to parish council meetings. I don't think that's a problem at the moment, but we'd have to see. Yeah.
Can I bring Councillor Williams in?
Thank you very much, Chair. I'm just looking at, just going further into the report on page 17. It talks about integrated offender management, and it obviously makes communities safer by reducing reoffending. Looking at the report, it says in April 2026, so there's a sentencing review, there's likely to be an increase in the cohort of numbers by about 20%. As soon as we've got that increase, are we sure we've got the resources in place to be able to handle that? And if the resource is the same, are we confident that this increase is going to be managed effectively?
That's something that we're really aware of at the moment. The IOM is currently being reviewed in terms of staffing, resourcing, capability, and scope at the moment, just to reassure ourselves essentially that we do have that capacity to take on the additional workload. Some of the cohort that we have will still be incarcerated. So whilst we have the overall numbers, they won't all be being actively managed at the current time. Obviously, in the sentencing review, the anticipation is that there will be more people who aren't incarcerated and will therefore be managed actively. So one, we are looking at that, and the second is to make sure that we've got that management capability that's not specifically IOM, so it might not fall within that criteria, but the neighbourhood teams are also picking up that offender management to make sure that we're preventing crime before it happens. So yeah, we're acutely aware of that.
Moving on, the next part of the next part of the report talks about the prevent and looking through the different statistics that we've got here. It says for the year ending March 2025, UK figures were 8,778, obviously was a rise of 27%. There's no data in there that talks about South Ribble in particular, about referrals to prevent for South Ribble. Have referrals to prevent increased in South Ribble, and what type of referrals are being referred to in prevent? Is there any particular nuance around South Ribble that's different to other areas?
The exact figures for South Ribble, but the prevent referrals is something that I'm actively involved in and monitor. There isn't anything of note for this area. There has nationwide been an increase, particularly following Southport, in terms of prevent referrals, which we've seen, like I say, across the board, but particularly in the northwest. There's been no particular trends that we've seen, certainly in South Ribble, that suggests that there's a change in risk or an increase in risk, but it is something that we monitor. And if there was, we'd put plans in place, but at the moment there's nothing by exception, I would say.
We normally put the figures in, but the data is officially sensitive now, so they're happy for me to share it with councillors, just not in a public document. So if you are interested in this specific data, we can share that, but not in a public document.
I was just going to come on to that. Actually, there's quite a lot of data in here that relates to national or whatever. There's nothing not a lot specific to South Ribble. So if I completely understand the confidential aspect of it. But I think if we're going to scrutinise that as councillors, I think it's important that we get that at a South Ribble level. Thank you.
As I say, I can pass it on to you, but it can't be in a public document because it's officially sensitive.
Councillor Martin.
Thank you, Chair. I was just looking at the stats, and it says referral sources 36% education and 30% police. I sort of wonder where the rest comes from.
So they are the major ones. Essentially, anywhere else, anybody can put those referrals in. They're the main ones. We get a lot from health. We do get them from local authorities. Prisons put some in, but other members of the public. But the bulk is educational policing.
Is there many from schools and things? Because I suppose that would be a worry if we start getting.
So a large proportion are from schools. Like I say, there has been a national trend which is understandable, really, and essentially the process is referrals are then triaged, so it doesn't always indicate that there's an issue, but there's a safeguarding concern that potentially is so. But like I say, I know looking at the data and the referrals that I'm aware of, there hasn't been a particular concern for South Ribble that suggests there's an increase in threats.
Just lastly, I mean, you mentioned the safeguard. Has that been quite prevalent within maybe the lower age, the younger folk?
In terms of all the referrals or the ones they get to prevent?
I mean, because the graphic says 11 to 15-year-olds, and so that they would fall under the child safeguarding
policy.
So I just
absolutely.
wondered whether a lot of those were then referred on, or...
Yes, so all of them that come through that, either way, we'll go through our multi-agency support hub, so the MASH will get a referral if there's a concern, particularly about a young person. So that will then be picked up by mainstream as well. It doesn't get siloed away.
Thank you.
The majority of prevent cases are safeguarding. Yeah. Majority. Yeah.
Councillor Pritchard.
Sort of reflecting on what Councillor Williams said a little moment ago, on page 20 we've noticed that a lot of the initiatives talk about or give Lancashire statistics, and in terms of us being able to scrutinise, we wondered why they weren't drilled down to a South Ribble level, please. Thank you.
Right, if it's from the IPC, I'll take that one back. I know the analyst provides a lot of the crime data, and I can feed that back, but I can feed that back for...
On page 20, paragraph 21, it refers to Operation Centurion, and we covered this last year in the meeting regarding e-scooters, e-bikes. How long is this operation, and is it ongoing? What are the top complaints of antisocial behaviour, and what is currently being done to combat this?
Yes, so Operation Centurion is Lancashire Constabulary's approach to ASB, so it's an ongoing programme. There's a number of things that this will cross over into. The e-bikes is obviously a large part of it at the moment, and has in South Ribble, we are seeing quite a notable decrease in the number of complaints we are receiving around e-bikes, but that's hopefully proportionate to the amount of resources we've put into removing e-bikes off the streets and the work we've done with them. In addition to that, you have all the additional tasking for any ASB hotspots in particular that we have. All the patrol plans. So it's essentially the overarching approach to ASB. So it will be ongoing. And the fact that it's still ongoing doesn't suggest that there's an ASB issue. It is just the best practice that we keep putting in place each time there's or to address the ASB. The main complaints, like I say, e-bikes has been huge. It is decreasing. Then it's very much area specific and probably not too much of a surprise that in some areas it is ASB, some it's noise. There's like I say, neighbour nuisance is quite a large one, and then some pockets of drug related issues, but again very dependent on those locations. So they're the top ones that we see repeatedly then with.
Yeah, inside. So we see them outside takeaways regularly. Is what's stopping the police just going and seizing them from these individuals?
So we do, and actually we've had quite a large number of seizures from those. So we have seen a big shift from, at one point we were literally, like you say, approaching and taking everybody's bike off them, and it is now rarer to find purely illegal e-bikes with some of the delivery drivers. However, yeah, we absolutely do, especially working with colleagues in Preston, because we get them travelling through. But yeah, no, there is nothing to stop us, and we do that.
Councillor Burrows.
I heard what you said about the reduction of reporting and the decrease in numbers with regards to e-bikes. But many residents say to me, if they phone the police, they don't come. Now, I understand that an e-bike goes zooming down a road. You can't just expect police officers to be there at the end. But how are you going to deal with that? Because I myself, and I know the people tell me regularly, that in Middleford Ward, I'm sure the councillor next to me will agree, that we do have, I presume it's young men, usually with their hoods up, sometimes with something across their nose and their mouth. And they're on bikes that haven't got registration plates on, haven't got lights on. And you can suddenly have one of these in front of you, because they could either be pulling quickly out of a road, or they could come across you where they're pulling into another road. They're off the road, they're on the footpath, they're back again. So it's really very difficult for people to report, because they're not going to be in that vicinity for very long. And I noticed you said about the online reporting, but for some people, they don't do online reporting. It's a phone call really, and as I say, the young people who are riding them have gone by then. You know, just how are you going to address that? Because it is a nuisance in areas, and maybe that's why you feel that there's less reporting, because people aren't doing it, and it means these young people are getting away with that behaviour.
No. So, and I think it's important to differentiate the drop in statistics and people's actual lived experience. So whilst there has been a real decrease in complaints about it, if you've still suffering from them in your area, it won't necessarily feel like that, because that's still an issue. So whilst we are pleased with the results we've achieved, it doesn't mean we've taken our eye off the ball in relation to them. So e-bikes have always been difficult to deal with, or traditionally difficult, because of the speeds they operate in. Like I say, if they're not there in that area when we get there, then how are we catching them? If they are, and it's a normal patrol car on their own, is it safe for us to start chasing people around the streets? Essentially, it's usually not the most appropriate way of dealing with it, but it is important that it still gets reported for a couple of reasons. Locally, one of the most effective things we've done is gone out and got Ring doorbell footage, and then the local neighbourhood team, whilst they're still covered up, will probably recognise the bike and who that is, and we can just go take it off them the following day, and that works some of the time. If it's a persistent issue, and we can document that by saying, you know, how many complaints there are, we get our specialist operations team in with their own bikes, their own cars. We usually get the fixed wing aircraft above, because then it can stay up for hours, and that's the safest way we get them. So we do particular operations, and that's when we're getting you 15, 20 at a time, because we're coming into an area, the fixed wing will spot them. We can wait till they're off, so we don't need to increase the risk by chasing them round, tip up to where they are, lock them up, or if needed, or take the bikes, and that's how we generally approach it. So those reports, even though they might not get a deployment at the time or an outcome at the time, will be feeding into us saying, right, we need you to come here on a Tuesday night and start rounding bikes up. So that's the, in the simplest form, how we're looking at it at the moment.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Martin.
Thank you, Chair. Again, obviously Middlefirth again. I'll try and be a bit more general than, because we are a South Ribble based committee, I suppose. The e-bikes, obviously, there's quite a lot that come from Preston. We tend to hear that from neighbourhood officers. So there are pinch points of how they can get here. So obviously, I would imagine that you'd be concentrating on those as well. But some are quite remote, aren't they? In theory. The other part of it is we've heard of sort of sprays that can be used to, if someone's been repeatedly offending you could sort of establish how many times. And there's obviously reports that the bikes, because of their illegality, they're often used for other illegal purposes. And I suppose the worry is the ingress of Class A's and Class B's into the borough from outside of the borough, like a borough line, I suppose, in that sort of way, but not using kids. So that's the sort of concern that some people have. And I understand that, if one bike goes past 50 people, that could be 50 reports. It might sound like there's a lot, but it's just, in theory, still one instance. So I think we need to be able to up the reporting and see a bit more reaction. And obviously, there was a big push on the police off-road bikes as well, the on-road off bikes. So, and perhaps one or two of them buzzing around might sort of help. Just on a slightly separate antisocial behaviour is NO2 use, nitrous oxide misuse. We often see it, and those of us who work on the roads will know of hot spots where you'll see boxes and boxes and boxes of empty canisters, and they're problematic because they're difficult to pick up, because simply if they still contain the chemical in them, then in theory you'd have to have a good reason to have it on you or with you, and I'm going to assume that disposing of them is probably a good reason. So I just wondered if there's any more, because that seems to have dropped off a little bit off the radar. And I know a lot of people used to think it was more of a littering problem than that, but when you see where they're doing this, like normally car parks and out of the way, the cars are involved, and after 5 minutes they think they're all right, but the cognitive effects of that are prolonged use, and of course it affects vitamin B12 uptake, which affects the health as well, which affects everyone as well. So I just wonder if there's any more concentration, because that could also lead over to a public health sort of side as well. So.
No, you're right to raise it as a concern. It is something that we do see quite regularly. Like you say, usually from a neighbourhood point of view, we'll get the reports of it, of the empty canisters in car parks particularly. But I know particularly road traffic colleagues are, now it's business as normal in terms of picking that up. So it's not necessarily something new that they're looking at, and possibly we don't talk about it quite as much because there's so much enforcement around it. But yeah, it is something that they will go out and target specifically.
Thank you. Councillor Williams.
Moving on to a different type of crime now. Talking about on paragraph 23 about shoplifting crimes. It basically states here that the report, the annual report for 24-25 shows 1,356 shoplifting crimes. I'm presuming that's across the whole of Lancashire. If it is across the whole of Lancashire, that only suggests 4 crimes a day across the whole remit of Lancashire, which just sounds a little bit difficult to believe. Is shoplifting more of a problem that is widespread reported? And obviously, shops do need to report it. How much do we think it's understated? And what can we do to improve the 17% solve rate? Because obviously that's very, very low. Is it worth shops actually reporting shoplifting if the solve rate is really quite low? How big a problem is this? And well, obviously there's the Lancashire aspect, and obviously there's a South Ribble aspect to it as well. How can we get a better handle on this?
Thank you. I would have to double check those figures because, like you say, that seems low for the whole of Lancashire, but very high for South Ribble. So currently the month to date, and I'll only be a couple of percentage around, but it's around 30% is the detection rate for South BCU, so the one for shoplifting. So again, the 17% seems quite low for that detection rate. It is a focus of ours because it is a volume crime that does affect everybody. The prices are passed on, and I know it's been nationally a concern that's raised. We will have underreporting. I think we do get that from some shops with a variety of different takes on whether they want to report it. We do have a huge amount of resource put into shoplifting. So when we do identify either hotspots or repeat offenders, we make sure we're looking at criminal behaviour orders on the back of those to prevent further crimes. It isn't something that is left. So again, the neighbourhood teams will focus on those shoplifters who are causing the most harm in the communities, so the repeat offenders. Immediate response will deal with all the single incidents. If it's things like children, we'll look at making sure that we're trying to divert people away, either with community resolutions or that type of lower level interventions. But if it's somebody who's persistent, then we will be going out, finding them, locking them up, putting them in front of the courts, and again, like I say, putting criminal behaviour orders on. So it is something we've worked quite hard to try and address. Certainly for South BCU, and this should be right as a statistic, year on year is a 12% decrease in terms of all shopliftings for South. And I appreciate it's not South Ribble, but I've not separated them out. I don't know if it's in the report, but I know off the top of my head that it was a 12% year on year decrease in shoplifting for South. The detection rate was more than 30%, so it's something we've really tried to grip. There is, like I say, a variation between shops on whether they want to report for a variety of reasons. Some is and one we need to address is, are they confident in the police? And I would hope they were, but I would appreciate some, perhaps we'd need to convince more. Some people don't want to take the time out. People don't always want to go to court with it, because if it's a small level shoplifting, going to court for a day may potentially have larger impacts. But I would always encourage people to report it to us, because that's how we're arrested. That's the evidence we're using to arrest people, give them CBO so they don't repeat and keep doing it. So I would, like I say, I'd have to check in those numbers, but I think we're in a much more positive picture than they would present.
Just to add, the council has used some of their UK SPF funding to fund some business security grants. So the community safety team have been contacting shops who've had repeat problems with either break-ins or burglaries to offer them additional security measures, additional grants. So we've had some shops that have added some additional security features like shutters, CCTV cameras, personal security for the staff. So we've been able to help and support some businesses who wouldn't normally be able to afford additional security measures.
Councillor Stringfellow.
Thanks, Chair. I just wanted to have a little bit more information about the schools programme, the Natural High, where you're trying to encourage children away from, you're diverting them away from bad behaviour. And I just wondered exactly what sort of activities they would get up to and how you would evaluate the progress of that.
Yep, so it's a schools programme that we've had specialist supporting for who are trained officers to look at. It's more about aspirations of leadership and aspirations to do something different. So Natural Highs about you can get highs in another way than using artificial means. So there's workshops, and I know that different councils have attended. Go on, you can tell more.
Attended, and it is quite hard to describe really, because it's a big audience and one man who is keeping everybody engaged, and it was mainly about people seeing that they had got skills, that not thinking that it was just about acknowledging the positives that people had, and people would you had people putting their hand up if it's hard to describe it, but put your hand up if you've done such a thing today or last week, and and then he picked 3 or 4 of those to come up and talk about a little bit more about it, and so people and play games, and it was only about an hour, I think, isn't it? But it was very interactive. All the teachers were really, really positive and said that there were young people there that were joining in that they didn't think would. And so it was a positive experience, but it is hard to just describe it to you, exactly what happened there, really. I don't know.
Yeah, that's it. And I think we also did follow-up sessions where we brought people in who had been to prison and explaining, the consequences of that and their experiences, to bring it to life of what they'd gone through and how they were trying to turn themselves around now. But to young people, don't go down that route because it's not a good route to go down. So there was quite a few sessions with the Natural Highs and the CELS programme, and were particularly, I think it was aimed at Year 7 pupils. So I think it was delivered to about 700. So it got a lot of take up from schools, which was really good. I hope so. Again, it's Police and Crime Commissioner funded, so we'll be applying again. So fingers crossed. But if you are interested, we can invite you to come along and have a look.
Sounds good. Councillor Pritchard.
Is it too early to look at any outcomes from the Natural High project? Have we seen anything that has made a meaningful difference, or is it too early to be able to do that at the moment?
Yeah, I suppose a lot of it is at the moment is just anecdotal evidence from the teachers about them engaging, and young people who wouldn't normally engage in activities that have. But it's difficult, isn't it? To maybe we could revisit a year later to see from a teacher's point of view and students if they used any of the learning outcomes. Yeah.
To see that. I think any time when there's a project that's as innovative as this one is getting a lot of praise from the teachers who are closest to their pupils, it would be really good to come back in a year's time and to say, what did you see happen? So that would be really something that I'd like to see. Thank you.
Councillor Williams.
Thank you, Chair. Moving on to page 24, it talks about domestic abuse and things like that. I've recently been contacted by a male resident regarding this, and I had a very, very long, detailed conversation with him, and he told me that the support available for male victims is lacking compared to female victims. And in his experience, the automatic assumption that is made is that when this is reported, that the male is always at fault. Now, he also mentioned this, then that in his experience, that this is ingrained in police assumptions, and is difficult to contest. That's in his experience. That's just one isolating of his experience. What support services exist for male victims, and are they comparable in availability and accessibility compared to women? And what if I'm not saying that it's his experience that there is a culture of automatic assumption that it's the male's fault. Is there anything being done to actually combat that assumption?
Thank you. It's concerning that's been raised. It's certainly something that's considered in the training that we give, not just our new recruits, but everybody. It is something that we do consider in terms of domestic violence is applicable across the board. So it is concerning that that's the impression that they were left with. I obviously couldn't comment on that particular case because I don't know the details, but I'll speak to you after if that's all right, just for some further details, because that is not how we should be operating. So
he did come to me in confidence. He wouldn't actually give me his name. He said it was a long-standing issue. But what I'm more concerned about is that he was saying there was just no support services. And, you know, obviously, effectively there was a group of him and a WhatsApp group that he was helping support himself and other people. He was very, very well knowledgeable and well read in the subject of various different things that are available, the organisations and all that type of thing. I just want to be assured that, you know, that these support services are actually out there and they're accessible the same as what they are for women.
So there is a specific service called Mankind, which is a specific service for male victims of domestic abuse. In general, I would say the services aren't equal between men and women for domestic abuse. So, for example, if you were a victim of domestic abuse and you were fleeing from domestic abuse, there is very few places for men to go. As in sports services and as in for homelessness. The number of particularly specified male shelters or support services, as in for us to try and find to relocate people, is very slim for male specific. There is definitely a gap in the services, but there is specific initiatives like Mankind who can work specifically with men to give them some advice. It's very difficult for a particular placements for men, but there is support there specifically. Some of the localised support through Lancashire Victim Services as well. They're not male or female specific, you know, like the IDVA support will support men and women. But there is definitely a difference between sports services, particularly with homelessness.
Councillor Burrows.
I was just going to ask something a bit more specific, sorry. It's with regarding male rape, because I supported a group to establish in Preston, and it was supporting victims of male rape. And apparently within that group, there was very underreporting. The ones that had reported didn't feel that the police supported them. And at the time, the commander of Preston Police came to visit the group after I'd had a word, and I know that the person coordinating that group went to speak to one of the programmes for officers that were being trained. So I don't know how that has developed within the service, whether people that are victim to that crime, whether they are coming forward now or not.
I've not got any data at the moment to sort of back that up, but I'm pleased to hear you got that response from the police, because
Yes.
whilst they're underreporting of a variety of different crimes and in different locations is always something that we're trying to overcome. So it's pleasing that in this case we absolutely have done something about it and tried to bring that lived experience in. Not necessarily with rape specifically, but one of the things that we do on a regular basis is we have something called People's Voice, which covers essentially anything that members of the community have experience of, which is when we're bringing them into either speak to particular groups or video it and then send it around the entire constabulary, basically sharing those lived experiences and those issues and what it feels like to be policed by Lancashire. So that's how we are trying to sort of build that experience within our own teams, that inside knowledge. So that does sound like something that has happened in this case. It is something that we're really conscious of. I do see those crimes being reported, but I don't have any data about whether the reporting is at a level that's the same as the actual offending, I'm afraid. But
It's something to keep an eye on.
Councillor Stringfellow.
Thank you, Chair. I noticed in paragraph 39 that the post of domestic abuse coordinator is now finished and there is nobody in that position now. How confident can we be that nobody's going to fall through the cracks if we haven't got a designated officer looking after that side of affairs?
That officer was appointed because we got some new burdens funding as a local authority. We now have got an officer who's dealing with vulnerable residents, so we've widened it out a bit more. But it's everybody's duty. So we have done quite a lot of education with our staff to know where to refer, how to refer. We've done some additional training this year with our staff and counsellors on domestic abuse. We attend the MARAC meetings and the multi-agency meetings. We've also got the South Ribble integrated team. So we have got lots of safety nets for people, and obviously most of the time it's our homelessness team who come across the cases, which though they're all trained, they're also trauma-informed trained, so particularly people with who are victims of domestic abuse will engage and then stop engaging and engage. So, to get them to understand if you have got that trauma, you may not want to fill in the forms or you may not want to engage on a regular basis. So we have done as much as we can to be able to support that. We're also working with people to try and keep them in their own homes if they want to do that. So we've got work that we do for additional security measures, including ring doorbells and security alarms and locks. So there is a lot of work that we're doing to also support people who have been placed in sheltered accommodation specifically for domestic abuse. So we've given grants for furniture to bring people who've completely fled with nothing. If they're moving on to their new accommodation, that there'll be furniture, white goods and support for them. So there is a lot of schemes that we're trying to do to be able to support people and make sure they don't fall through the net.
Councillor Williams.
Yeah, staying on with this subject, I'm going to have to be very careful about how I choose my words with this. And please don't take anybody who's listening to this. Please don't take this in a way that it is not meant to. There's a focus on the campaign against women and girls, but there isn't sort of any focus on all sectors of the population. Obviously, in the report it details that it's split 70-30 between female and male, you know, there's still a significant number of male members of the population who are affected by this. And there's big campaigns or whatever for women and girls. Why are campaigns not scoped out and identified for men, disabled and other cultural groups? Could they risk being forgotten about and left behind if there's too much of a focus on one thing? And I have to be very careful how I mean that. Not that I'm trying to say that violence against women and girls is not important. I'm just trying to ensure that there are other people involved in this, and focusing on one thing, other people may risk being getting left behind. I just wonder what we're trying to do to combat that.
No, and I do take your meaning with that. So I think the focus particularly doesn't take away from other victims of crime. It is addressing a national issue that we have around violence with women and girls, and both the detection rates, the volume of offending, the severity. That is a real issue that we need to put focus on. And I know you weren't saying we shouldn't, but that's the focus. It's something that really needs gripping. In terms of other victims who don't fall into that, it isn't taking away from them. It's not the fact that we don't recognise male victims of either, well, any offending. And there are campaigns in relation to it, but in terms of general policing, it is essentially making sure that we are doing the best for, well, for all victims, but a particular weakness for us as the police service in general has been around violence against women and girls, so that's why that's getting that focus. So I know it's not that specific, but it doesn't take away from other victims.
Councillor Martin.
Thank you, Chair. Just on the same subject, we sometimes hear that some victims have been stalked for a period of time before an offence or in between repeated abuses of that person. So I know that there were laws put in place to strengthen that, and the police have the ability to put their own injunctions, I think. So I just wondered, has there been a link, or can you see, has there been seen a link that can happen, and could more be done on perhaps some of the stalking offences that you know of that could prevent any future crimes, or be a telltale for any possible infractions in the future?
Absolutely, it's a very good point. So stalking, particularly around DV, where there's that relationship or even that fixation, is a real risk factor. So one of the focuses from within the police has been identifying that, making sure that we're identifying it, that we're risk assessing it properly, and that then we're dealing with it. So that's come across a number of areas. So training has been a large part of that, particularly around making sure that we know what we're looking for, that the risk assessments we've got in place are fit for purpose, and that people are using them in the right way. And then the second part is dealing with them promptly. So again, the risk assessment's key in that, because that identifies if they're a high risk offender, then essentially that prioritises getting people in, putting those, like you say, those either injunctions in, the domestic violence prevention orders if it's appropriate, or just putting people in front of the courts for the stalking itself. So yeah, it's absolutely a concern. It is something that there's been a lot of work put into to make sure we're improving our performance in those areas, and it is something we're really alive to, the risk from.
The other side of that is there is also electronic stalking, I suppose you could say. Would both of those be looked at with a similar sort of vigour?
Yes, and again, I think this is where the risk assessment and making sure it's suitable it is right, because and again, I suppose it depends on what you mean, because there's a couple of ways of there's the sort of the harassment using electronic means. There's we see well, nationally there's been an increase in things like AirPods, where they're using technology to follow people around and things like that. So yeah, it's something that we're really conscious of, and like I say, it is something that's discussed within policing and training.
Just to say, our staff team got trained on electronic stalking before Christmas, because it's something that's, not something that we knew a lot about. So we had specialist trainers come in just to talk about electronic stalking, the use of social media, the use of bank cards and linking bank accounts, CCTV, sort of Alexa devices, so we know what to look out for.
Finally, would that be included in our councillors' sort of training going forward? Because I think if social media or social stuff and internet stuff can be very not confusing, but it advances quicker than sometimes we can appreciate its impact. So I think if we're up to date with that, it's signs that we could look for as well as councillors, because we are out and about, and I think it might be prudent to sort of see that, because obviously we don't want any of it, but we want to be able to recognise it if we do see it, I think, and help you guys sort of stop this from happening. So thank you.
That's good to know, Jennifer, and it would be appreciated if it could be rolled out to councillors. Yeah, I appreciate that. Next question. Page 26 and 27, paragraph 52, refers to the South Ribble integrated team. When a South Ribble integrated team case is closed, and how do you know if the process has been effective? Is there any follow-up, say 6 months down the line, to see how the individuals are doing?
Yeah, so our community safety team do follow up on cases. So generally, even though the cases are closed, they're not really closed. So we do follow up. A lot of our cases are generally also led by social prescribing. So a lot of our referrals come in from social prescribers. So again, they're regularly checking up on people that we've supported, and tend to sort of keep an eye on those, particularly who've gone through the South Ribble integrated team.
And how many cases would you say per year need to be brought back in for further work to be done?
It's a quite low percentage actually, because they're very reluctant to discharge people, the integrated team and the social prescribers. So we can have cases that are there for a couple of years actually, and I'm absolutely fine with that, because I feel that if those people do need that support, it's one of the things that we considered are we going to limit sessions? Are we going to say, well, that you can have 10 sessions and then we're fine, you've had 10, that's that's your lot. But we decided not to do that. Some people may require very limited support, and it might just be signposting, and others may need long-term support. So that's what we're trying to do, and with the hope that they're able then to move on with community support and community groups that they're become part of, and really integrate as much as we can into the community. So, yeah.
Brilliant, that's good to know. Councillor Martin, have you got a question?
Thank you. I was just looking at page 29, the crime table. It's just a bit of clarification, really. It says drug offences. Does that include anything that could be a drug offence, sort of paraphernalia and other such items? And the other one would be the vehicle offences. Would that include such e-bikes and Section 59s and stuff like that? Thank you.
Thank you. So essentially no on both of those. So drug offences will be possession of the drugs themselves, or dealing or conspiracy to deal, so the trafficking offences, and the vehicle offences will be essentially theft from or theft of type offences.
Thank you.
Councillor Pritchard.
Looking at the table, you can see that overall crime is going down, but really worryingly, some of the really serious offences are going up. Just like to ask what's being done to tackle this issue, please.
So the crime data is something that we do look at very closely, and I know we say that a lot in terms of that's why the reporting is so important. All of them, if there's ever a spike, we have a process internally. So we've got internal analysts, then we have a divisional meeting that essentially works out where our resources are best going. So you will always have your neighbourhood teams and your response teams, but then for each particular spike, it'll get a bespoke response. I've looked through the data. The violence against the person one was particularly concerning because that's a more recent spike. At the moment, it is more of a general trend than a particular identifiable area or problem. There's a number of repeat locations and offences where we're aware of, but we go through to understand it. So I know that in December, 8% of our violence was alcohol related, which is a smaller proportion, because one of the theories was, is it linked to increased drinking or particular hotspots, but it's not. So each one of those increases will have had an analyst look at it, repeats for victims, hotspots, or victims' locations and suspects, to make sure that we're getting a grip of it before it either continues to create more victims or spirals out of hand. So, which is where we've achieved those reductions in the other areas. So that's the general approach to that, if that answers.
From what you've just told me, that the analysts will analyse and then resources will go to those areas where there's peaks. Yeah, thank you.
Councillor Williams.
Yeah, well, I think I've noticed this information that we've got here is really good information about what we've actually got here. Obviously, I'm presuming this table is a South Ribble level, but obviously there is data available, and you've obviously highlighted different wards that a lot of this occurs in. Obviously, different levels of crime, different varieties will happen in different areas. Obviously, as I'm representing Leyland Central, a lot of stuff around certain things will occur in my ward. It's been more of an ask, really. This sort of information is only available sort of like once a year, to a scrutiny committee. It's not really available to all councillors. I'm just wondering whether this type of data can be added into some of the data packs that we're actually getting from the communities team. So I think it'd be really, really useful for councillors to know exactly what crime is happening in their particular areas, rather than just the scrutiny committee seeing it once a year. I think it just brings it to life a bit more.
Yeah, that's exactly what we're doing. So we're just preparing them at the moment, so they will have specific crime data in for the specific areas. Again, we can really get it down quite as focused as you want. So if you have a look at these data packs, if you say, well, I want it more specific, we can try and get it down to particular, if you want a particular park, we can get it down to a particular park. If you want it in a particular road, we can get, say, numbers, or, you can see from the hotspots that we've got, there is specific businesses with hotspots, whether it's McDonald's or Morrison's or the leisure centre. So we can get as specific data as you want, particularly if you're designing your hub plans of what you want to do and focusing on. We can get really in-depth data from the analyst.
On page 30, paragraph 70, the breakdown of antisocial behaviour incidents recorded show what a serious issue this is for our residents, what is being done to reduce antisocial behaviour and reduce the impact on our residents. And on page 29, the table, what is crimes against society? Could you give us a few examples of what that actually means, please?
So crimes against society, it's a large catch-all. There are a number of, and I might have to, in fact, rather than me do it off memory, do you want me to send you some examples through of those? Because like I say, it's a bit of a catch-all. So in terms of ASB, yeah, it continues to be a concern, and I'm acutely aware, again, it's one of these where statistics can show that the numbers are dropping, but actually if you live with ASB, it's everything, isn't it? So we're acutely conscious of that. We have, again, the regular taskings. Each week the neighbourhood teams will update their patrol plans to make sure that we're going to the right places. If it is, the amount of youth ASB is actually, I think it's somewhere in here, is it about 23%, so it's not as high as it has been in previous years. But if it is, and if it's around a particular area, a park, I know we've had issues around McDonald's locations and specific addresses. For example, with those, we will do a visit potentially with a designing out crime officer, with the management of those locations, and we'll look at either, and in fact with yourself, with diversionary activities, the youth ASB is something that actually we've got quite a suite of options that we do consider with those. We have a number of repeat locations that are potentially disputes within a local area. Again, those are operated through our problem-orientated policing, so they'll be allocated to an officer. They have to come up with a plan through that. So each one of those, particularly if it's a persistent issue, will have a specific plan with a specific objectives, named officer and supervised. So they should all be gripped.
So generally we do always focus on young people and antisocial behaviour, and there is quite a lot of activities, as just said, particularly with diversionary activities. We're also going to start up a scheme called Guardians in South Ribble, which is similar to the South Ribble integrated team, but it will be specific for young people. So if young people are being drawn in to antisocial behaviour, or young people are at risk, there is going to be a specific Guardians team that will circle around those individual young people. But again, I just wanted to stress that it isn't always young people. A lot of antisocial we're dealing with is neighbour disputes. We do get involved in a lot of neighbour disputes, and we have got a mediation service that we can access, which is a really useful service if people want to engage with that. And we do work a lot with the police to try and do some mediation to try and calm neighbour disputes down. So that is quite high in the amount of statistics for antisocial behaviour, not just young people.
I assume some of these neighbourhood disputes are hedges and parking, etc.
Just move my bin is yeah. Another one. Yep.
On the, do you know the burger van that you were doing at in Bamber Bridge at Walton High School? Has that been positive? And if it has, is there plans to roll it out elsewhere in South Ribble?
Yes. So yes, we did the Scran van. It was called. So it was part of consulting with young people in that area to look at activities they would engage in. So it was more about encouraging people to just talk to us. Well, not to me, because they wouldn't talk to me, but young people who are youth development officers, to be able to work and try and understand what activities are there and what they want. So there was I think there was hundreds of kids spoken to about the different activities. So there was lots of feedback about sporting activities, low-cost activities, a centre of their own, mental health related activities. So it has really helped us to look at designing what we are going to provide in those areas. So it's been really useful. We are looking at commissioning some youth activities. So I've been, the MP for Ribble Valley has asked us to put a bid in for some funding to look at some youth activities. So we're working on lots of different projects to get that expanded out.
Thank you for that, Councillor. Councillor Pritchard. Councillor Williams.
Yeah, looking at the data and youth incidents, I think looking at it, by far the worst areas are around Tesco's on Towngate and McDonald's, which is effectively my ward. So I'm concerned that those are other areas, and I know that they've been areas for quite some time. Also now planning has been granted for another Burger King on Tesco car park. Can we make sure that this doesn't become an additional hotspot that stretches police resources even further? Well, the other thing I'm more concerned about is, because it's on the same site as Tesco's, it doesn't become a Tesco that we're recording them separately and or it doesn't become a Tesco's complaint and combined, and we make sure we're distinct in saying that's Burger King, that's Tesco's, and we're treating them as, you know, if they wander from Tesco's and then go to Burger King because it's literally 50 yards away, that anything is reported is treated as 2 incidents rather than just 1 incident on the same site, just to keep the reporting accurate and to understand the issues around reporting and things like that. Is that the type of thing you would actually do as part of that, and to get an accurate view of it? And is there anything particular being done in those areas, or is anything the neighbourhood hope can do, and that can help prevent some of that?
So, yeah, in terms of the recording, I think it's something we'll have to watch as the situation develops to see whether we're either getting double counting, where, like you say, we're amalgamating it into one. If it develops, we will see. Like I say, I know there is a POP for that area already. One of the things that we've done, funded through the PCC's office, is we've got a number of safer pods that are essentially mobile CCTV. I don't know if you've seen them online. At the moment, we've got them deployed to a different hotspot area, and it's essentially really effective. They are short term because I think there's a bit of a general impact when they arrive, and that changes it, and then it'll degrade or we move it somewhere else. But that's been something we've found, particularly if it's related to specific times like summer or whenever we can predict that, we can put those in place. In terms of, like I say, Burger King, we'll have to see. I think is probably depending on what, if something does develop. We do find that some locations that we think will have problems and we don't. But we'll be all over it if it does.
And I think with particular venues, we've had the designing out crime officer down to give some advice, particularly to McDonald's. There's some work on security that they've been putting in. There's also been training with McDonald's staff to de-escalate, because sometimes staff may escalate the issue rather than de-escalate. There's also lots of techniques that they're using, turning Wi-Fi off, to discourage people, playing classical music. So there's a lot of work that's been done with the staff in particular areas that we've had the hotspots in, to try and see what we can do to make sure it doesn't become a crime and antisocial behaviour.
Councillor Martin.
Thank you. Just on that, I mean, it's because obviously that hasn't happened, or there isn't anything there to perhaps influence any behaviours. So the question then would be, sort of, what influence can the police have on a planning application? So if there's a I was there at the planning committee, and there was a general consensus that there will be issues. So I was just wondering what powers or what advice or what influence you could have on the planning process, and whether you could, at the planning process, ask for stuff to be put in place. And then post-planning, sort of asking about the enforcement, or asking for any work to be done to then prevent any crimes or any antisocial behaviour that may appear from that. And if it gets that bad, could the building be given an ASBO or something like that?
So I know on some planning we will make comment. I don't know if we would on this type of project. In terms of powers, not essentially the decision won't be ours. There's no powers that I'm aware of to enforce people to invest particularly. We do find that generally people are supportive, because ASB, and if it, especially around a business, is not necessarily helpful to them. So it depends on that impact, but generally we are supported. And in terms of sort of ASBOs for locations and dispersal orders and things like that, there are some powers like dispersal orders we can use. I mean, I would hope we wouldn't get to that stage, and it's something that we certainly consider with yourselves quite robustly, really, because it also has an impact on other businesses in the area and their sort of people's views of the area. So there are powers, but like I say, I'm not anticipating it getting to that level where I'm worried yet.
The council also has closure order powers. We've never used them in South Ribble. We have used them, not recently, probably a year ago in Chorley, but that was a consistent ignoring of advice and guidance that were given, and there was a lot of proof of criminal exploitation of young people, as well as drugs and drug offences. So it wasn't just sort of antisocial behaviour, there was a lot of other things associated with that. That is a last resort that we would ever close the premises down. And obviously the dispersal orders as well is again as a last resort, because we don't want it to look like, you know, the area is crime ridden and we have to do dispersal orders, because it's not good for local businesses either. So we try and, as much as we can, give that advice and guidance, working with the police to do design out crime and education to the businesses, and working again with the young people, hopefully with the guardians and the South Ribble integrated team, to be able to identify those young people who are more likely to be drawn into it.
Councillor Stringfellow.
Thank you. In paragraph 79, there's some information about incidents of racial and religious hate crime. And the worrying thing is that of all the hate crime, this type is, you know, it's 80% of the total of all the hate crime. Do we know anything about the demographics of the people who are actually carrying this out, and what's fueling it, and what more can we do to combat it?
So in terms of what's fueling it, what I have noticed from the offences is we have a larger number of people committing the offences than I would have anticipated. So I'd anticipate people with particular views doing multiple offences, and that's not borne out, it's single offences. There's obviously a lot happening nationally, internationally, that is bringing things into the forefront of people's minds, and I personally wonder if that has an impact on what people are saying, but I've not got the data to back that up. I do know that we have a specific response to hate crime, so each person who is subject to hate crime will, in addition to the normal response through immediate response, will be contacted by a hate crime officer. It'll be overseen by an inspector to make sure that there are no lines of inquiry that are not followed. There'll be support to the victim if they, you know, just to explain to them the process through courts and things like that. So our detection rate is, and again, it depends on which month, but again, over 30%. And if you include people who support going to court, because again, not everybody does want to do that, it's just under 50%. So whilst that's not where I'd like it to be, it is. I hope that shows that still, if somebody is the victim of a hate crime, we will pursue it as robustly as we can. So it's something that we've got a real eye on at the moment.
Generally, the complaints about hate crime that the council receive are in relation to neighbour disputes. So they'll have a dispute and then they will say something which is a hate crime because they're so angry with the neighbour, and they'll say something, and then that's when we'll get as a council to hear about it. So it's quite interesting from us that it's generally associated with another thing.
Councillor Martin.
And finally from me, just on that, obviously there's a huge amount of hate crime online, and unfortunately it's targeted not just to particular individuals, but we all seem to see it because of the way social media works. So I was wondering whether that becomes part of it, and whether any could be attributed from or to South Ribble and residents. The other part is the obviously Easter weekend when I say just gone, I mean last year we had that offensive attack on a church, a religious hate crime. While we don't see that very often we do see other faiths severely targeted and unnecessarily targeted. So I just wondered sort of whether we have that issue, or is there an emergence? Because I know you referenced people doing one-off incidences that tend not to be part of a wider group, but when you start, if someone was to then, for instance, obviously that councillor that incited or was found guilty of inciting hate against a demographic, if that was the case, have we seen anything like that happen, or is there anything in plan in case something like that could be happening? Because we do have a number of people from different faiths in the borough, and people of no faith who can also be targeted. So I just wondered sort of what would be the mechanism to protect those people, and I know the police in the report that obviously the guy went to prison for what he did, and rightly so. But I was just wondering what protection would residents feel from that sort of offensive behaviour?
Thank you. So there was a number of topics in there. I think the online offences is interesting for a number of reasons. There's some case law in terms of what is an offence and what isn't, and I think that sometimes causes issues because some stuff that actually isn't an offence online, because it's not directed at a person, it's a general comment that is not something that you would normally say isn't an offence. But if you say it to somebody's face, it's an offence. So I think that causes some issues. It's not, like I say, I don't think that features in our crimes particularly because of the nature of that offending. There is issues with identifying people online, especially with platforms that are out of country, because either they don't have the details, it's very slow to get the details, they won't give us the details. In terms of specific groups, religions being targeted, and again, this comes down to, again, how important the reporting is. So we do a lot of work with all the neighbourhood teams to make sure that we're available for people to report to us through all those mechanisms. But it's never going to be perfect. So I would say if anybody does have that concern, make sure that they tell us, even if it's quite small and isn't criminal at the moment. We need to know early on, because that's, if there's a prelude that we can intervene, that's what we will do. I'm not aware of any ongoing issues that suggest that there's a theme of attacking people or particular groups. But again, we see nationally, and sometimes it seems to come without that indicator beforehand. So it's something that we're always alive to. And like I say, if there are people in the communities who are uncomfortable for a reason that they probably don't think crosses the criminal threshold, please just tell us anyway, because we'd rather know what it is and discuss it with them than not know and pick it up once it crosses that threshold. So.
Thank you.
Councillor Pritchard.
I just wanted to be clear about the figures in this report here. 87% of the offences have been race and religious related. Is that 87% of the 53%, or is that 87% of the violence against the person? I wasn't quite sure. My second point about this is that that's a really huge number of it's a really high percentage of violence against people from a race or religious perspective. So looking at where this is, and I get your point about international, national events and how they influence and come down to this, but you were able to look at where the wards that were affected, Middlefirth, Samlesbury and Walton, Banbridge East and West, and the peak months, and that's really encouraging that we've got that data. Is there something that that you can do and that we can support that actually is a specific project in those wards at specific times, if we think there's a pattern here and that they're the wards where this is happening? Because that, to me, is such a worrying statistic, and I'd like to drill down a little bit further if possible, and we could do that outside of this meeting, as to really who's committing these offences and which races and religions are being targeted. because Councillor Martin reminded us of actually there was a Christian church that was targeted, and sometimes we forget that. So this is really something that I'd like to focus on, and I don't know what your thoughts are on how we could do that or best do that. Thank you.
No, absolutely, and I'd be more than happy if we have a discussion outside. I can get some data. Generally, there aren't particular patterns, certainly in terms of you know, locations, repeat offenders, repeat suspects. If there are repeat offenders, we've already identified them, if you will. We don't particularly, yeah, I think it'd be an interesting discussion for us to have.
Are there any further questions from members on the committee? No. I'll open this up to any members not on committee, if they have any questions. Councillor Pillinger.
Male-female domestic abuse. It's some years now since I was professionally involved in the field as a Methodist minister, but the British Crime Survey comes out at more like 60-40 rather than 70-30. These figures obviously come from cases brought to the police, whereas the Crime Survey is a more general thing. And I wonder whether that difference is partly due to what the impression given by the gentleman here that Hayden was, Councillor Williams was talking to, that there is a presupposition, because we've done a lot of work, necessarily done a lot of work to move from a position where, oh, it's just a domestic, to a position where we take everything seriously, that there is then, I certainly had, when I was professionally involved, I had police officers saying to me, but it's always men against women. So they wouldn't say it, they'd say it informally. That was a decade or more ago. But I do wonder whether the difference between the figures does tell us something about it would tell two things to me. One is the willingness of men to actually say something about being abused. I know that there are cases I've dealt with like that. And the other is whether there is still some presuppositions that need challenging. The training we had, one of the slides said, and I challenged the presenter, the vast majority of cases are men abusing women. And I challenged the use of the word vast. It was interesting that a few weeks later, the same person was presenting at a different thing that I was at. They came and said to me, I'm sorry, I've not changed the slide yet. But that sort of thing is still in the training. So is it something we need to pay some attention to?
I think you're right. I think there is the real risk of underreporting, as we see in a number of crimes, particularly around this area. So I absolutely wouldn't hold our stats up as this is an accurate reflection of everything that is occurring in reality. I think there is potential for underreporting. There definitely has been a change in the training and the focus within the police, so which is why I was so concerned with the impact and the views that the person you spoke to had, because it's not something that, one, we accept, or two, train or how we approach it. So if people are suffering it, absolutely report it. It is not a case of we're blinkered down one particular route. It is something we take incredibly seriously. So, but yeah, still improvements.
I've not got any other councillors not on committee that want to ask any questions at the moment. Any questions from members of the public? Alderman Forrest.
I was coming out of Sainsbury's the other night, and that was quite a spectacle. And there's a whole gaggle of black clad e-bike people coming up towards me. I think some were even on the wrong side of the road. And all I could do was basically come to a halt. It was just dangerous. And shortly after they'd gone past me, of course, there was a blue light coming along, and my only thought was, how on earth is he going to do anything about that little lot? And you talk about having fixed-wing aircraft as a way of dealing with them. But, you know, listening to it, don't you think we have enormous gaps in the law as far as these e-bikes are concerned, and in terms of licensing and insurance and so on? I mean, it's amazing to me that you don't get more people killed by the things as they come hurtling past. You know, is nobody making any noises or anything from the constabularies or anything like that about trying to do something to improve the law and regulation of these vehicles?
So, I mean, certainly the lethality and the fact that there have been fatalities in Lancashire and nationwide related to e-bikes is why sort of the use of the fixed wing, which sounds excessive at first hearing, is actually justified. There is a real risk to members of the public, as you saw, as well as the e-bike riders themselves. Most of the time, they aren't allowed them on the road, which is why going to people outside, you know, if takeaway drivers are using them or whatever, that's the simplest way, is just to go and get them when they're off them, because they are not legal to be used on the road. So it's not necessarily the laws that we've got an issue with, and one of the focuses we've had has been around making sure that if it should be insured, we're taking them under the no insurance powers, because if you don't insure it, then you won't get it back, essentially. So we're actually keeping most of these e-bikes. It's not like people are coming and collecting them and we're inconveniencing them. We're keeping the vast majority of them. When I say keeping them, they've been crushed. So people aren't getting them back. So I do think, and I think that's why there has been a massive decrease, because they're such expensive machines that it's not the sort of thing you just buy another one and hope you don't get caught. So it is having an impact. It's just the scale of the issue, I think. And like you rightly pointed out, one police officer in a car against a group of people on these e-bikes, even if it was just one, that they're not going to catch them, they're too mobile. Is it proportionate to chase a bike? How are you going to get them to stop? Are you going to knock them off? That's why the best approach we've had is to identify where the people are likely to be, go with a well-resourced team with all the kit and hit a particular area. So you will get intensive focus on particular areas and then less. So you won't always get, again, come back to, you won't always get that response, but it will be logged and we will come to those areas and try and get them in those circumstances. And again, the second one is, if it's somebody that we recognise, we'll go around and get them in the morning, which we do regularly as a neighbourhood team.
Darren, please can you formulate any recommendations?
Just some thoughts from the discussion tonight that the committee might like to consider. The committee thanks the Chair of the Community Safety Partnership, Chief Inspector and Cabinet Member for attending and answering the committee's questions. The committee commends the work of the Community Safety Partnership over the last 12 months. The committee welcomes plans to strengthen links between the partnership, police and council's community hubs, including promoting ways in which residents can report issues and also provide an opportunity to share data and local information. The committee asks that information on Prevent at a South Ribble level be shared confidentially with Scrutiny members. The committee requests future reports break community safety information down to a local South Ribble level rather than being reported at a county-wide level. The committee requests that more work be undertaken to target where e-bikes and e-scooters congregate, such as places as takeaways and shops, etc. The committee asks for further information on shoplifting and the detection rate for a future meeting. The committee commends the Natural High Schools initiative and suggests it be evaluated with a view to extending the programme further in the borough. The committee would be grateful if information on online stalking could be shared with members to assist them in their ward work. The committee welcomes that overall crime in South Ribble is down, but expresses concern that serious crimes such as violence, sexual offences and drugs offences have increased. The committee is grateful for the offer of a definition of crimes against society being provided, and finally the committee looks forward to discussing hate crimes outside the meeting on an informal basis. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Darren. Everybody on the committee happy for these? Anything to add? No? Councillor Williams?
I think the only thing to add, I think Jennifer's already taken this away, is to include all this data in the packs that we're actually getting organised crime data by the categories that we've got, by ward in effect. I know Jennifer said it's on its way. We're just wondering whether that needs to go as a formal recommendation.
Chair, I can include it in the third recommendation around the working with the hubs. We've mentioned in there around data sharing and information sharing, so we can strengthen that with mentioning the information and more pack.
Brilliant, thank you, Darren. Thank you very much, Chief Inspector Neil, Jennifer Mullen and Councillor Kath Unsworth for your time this evening. Jennifer's staying on, aren't you? Wearing a different hat. Cheers, thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.
Item 6, inequality costs 6-month progress report. Unfortunately, Councillor Belinsky-Gelder, Deputy Leader and Cabinet Member for Communities and Customers, is unable to attend, but we have... oh, she... I thought you said she was here, sorry. But we're lucky to have the multi-talented Jennifer Mullen wearing a different hat, wearing the hat of the Director of Communities and Leisure. Please, can you just give us an overview of the progress report? This is an opportunity for the committee to assess progress on the scrutiny review recommendations, make sure good progress is being made, and offer any advice on how the recommendations are being implemented.
I think I'm happy to answer any questions. This report covers quite a number of directorates, so it's not just me. There's a number of directorates that really contribute to this. So there's been a lot of successes to review for us. There's been the progress on the newly established Equality, Diversity and Inclusion Board, which has really been success and hopefully is a vehicle for us to transform even further. And there's been obviously a new corporate strategy, which has included some support, well, significant amounts of money to support with a community grants programme. We've looked at workshops. We've done obviously the action plans for the community hubs, where we've talked about the data packs again, which will come in with some really good and useful data for community hubs to look at and review, including asset maps. We've also got the new digital strategy, which is promoting digital exclusion. We're looking at, obviously we've already mentioned social prescribing, and the service has been in the new budget. You'll see in the new budget is included there. Obviously we've also looked at the homelessness and the recommendations that have come out of the scrutiny review, which has been added into our rough sleeping strategy and further added into our housing strategy, which is due soon. Fuel poverty has significantly reduced in South Ribble, so we're the lowest in Lancashire. We're also probably, I think, the lowest in the northwest for fuel poverty, and we are going to combine that into our anti-poverty action plan, which we are preparing. So there's lots of work that we've been doing and lots of really positive outcomes. So I'm happy to answer as many questions as I can, or I can then refer it through to the appropriate director.
Can I just ask, on the fuel poverty,
Yes.
what do you think the main reason is for the good response on that?
The communities team? No. So we do work quite a lot with looking at the data that we've got for energy efficiency. So we can access, and we've got quite a lot of data on where we've got people who, so the energy ratings of the homes, we're then able to target some of our work there. So we've targeted streets, promoting the boiler replacements and the window replacement schemes that we've got. Again, our social prescribers are able to promote the schemes that we've got as well in the area. We've also, in some of the hubs, have looked at funding some work with Preston Care and Repair, which has also identified fuel poverty issues and insulation problems. So it's really, there's multiple strands really of that work that's really helped and targeted particular areas. Interestingly, the fuel poverty areas are not where you think. They are in western parishes and rural areas because of the access to mains gas and electricity. So, you know, fuel oils is particularly expensive. So again, we've been targeting some work there. So it's a bit of everything really. We've been also looking at, we've also got some guides on our website about energy efficiency measures, as in work that we're doing on alternatives with solar panels and some work with the air source heat pumps as well. So it's a bit of a general approach that we've been trying to target.
That's good. It's a good news story. Councillor Martin.
Thank you, Chair. Hi. Just, I mean, the fuel poverty is really good news, and I suppose that there's always a concern that it's just about hitting targets and things like that, whereas what is happening is people are feeling literally a complete benefit and warm and be able to sort of turn things on. I sort of like when I look at food poverty, because that's an issue, and I'm not sure if this is the correct term for it, but you get sort of like food deserts. So it would be an area where there isn't a place where you can buy fresh produce. I just wondered if that's ever been looked at, or if it could be looked at, or if it has been, do we have anything like that, rather than, because what tends to have, some communities rely on garages and ice cream vans sometimes, I know in other areas have done that, so I just wondered if there's ever been an indication that might be an issue.
I don't think that's anything we've actually looked at about that sort of data. I mean, it's something that we can do. I know we work a lot with our food banks, and part of that is to look at fresh produce. Fresh produce, obviously people tend not to donate, so there's the tins and other things that sort of shelf life stable things that they tend to donate rather than fresh. So we're using the Household Support Fund to top up food banks to be able to then buy fresh food and fresh produce. So we've been able to fund each of the food banks in the area money to be able to then go out and shop for fresh produce to be able to use there. But it's not something we've looked into. I mean, we have been doing lessons for cooking, particularly with slow cookers. So we've been giving slow cookers away to try and encourage people to cook and cook fresh. But it's something we could look into.
Yeah. I mean, I bring it up because I have to thank Councillor Flannery, because his brother is doing similar work on that sort of thing in Liverpool, in the area where he lives. So I might talk to him and then come and talk to you, because
that'd be really good.
What they have to do is they're going around with a vehicle that gives people the opportunity to get fresh produce, which is I think is pre-packed and all that sort of stuff is almost the same as processed food, isn't it? Because it tends to be filled with air that stops it from rotting and chemicals just make it look shiny still. So okay, yeah, we'll sort that out. Thank you.
Councillor Pritchard.
Thank you. Jennifer, just as chair of the Inequalities Task Group and Councillor Martin sat on the group, I'd just like to thank you and all of the staff across the borough that completed this report, because it's really impressive. Just a couple of points on specifically Action 2 and 12, where they've not progressed as quickly as we would have liked. Could we just, when we report next time, give a date that we expect that to be completed by? But other than that, it's an excellent report, thank you. But I would like to pick up on what Councillor Martin's just talked about, and I really think this is a really, really, really vital point, and perhaps the anti-poverty strategy could pick this up alongside the fuel strategy. Just out of personal interest, when I did a health promotion degree at UCLan. This was the subject of my dissertation, and at the time my son was about 2 years old, so I asked my husband to walk with him without a car from the university to see where was the first place he could buy fresh food, and it was the Spa in Plungington, and of course it was all very much more expensive than you would pay if you could have got into the market and so on and so forth. And then of course there's the carrying of the fruit and vegetables. So it's a massively important issue, and I feel quite passionate about it. I think the project that you've alluded to in Liverpool is excellent. I've seen some of the footage that Councillor Flannery's shown. It seems to be, it's almost like a door-to-door grocery van, if you like. So I think it's something that we could really look into, and I'd like to thank Councillor Martin for raising that.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Cheers.
Will do.
Don't think there's any further questions. I'd just like to thank Jennifer for the hard work you've done on... Oh, go on. No, there's no questions on. Sorry, before I move on, is there any questions from members not on committee that are joining via Teams? No? Yeah, just thank Jennifer for all the hard work, and all the members, Councillor Pritchard, Councillor Martin, for their input into this. So I hope they're paying you overtime tonight, Jennifer. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.
Right, item 7, committee matters. 7A, task group update. We've had 2 meetings since the last Community and External Scrutiny Committee. They were held on, I'll find it in a minute, the 3rd of November. We met with Jennifer Mullen as the chair of the South Ribble and Chorley Community Safety Partnership, her role as Director of the Leisure Company, and her role as the Director of Community and Leisure. And we also met with Eugene Swift, who is the Detective Chief Inspector of Lancashire Police, on the 8th of December. Our next meeting is booked in on the 3rd of February 2026 with the LADO, which is the Local Authority Designated Officer. Moving on to item 7B, the Lancashire County Council Health and Adult Services Scrutiny Committee. Councillor Jackson can't be with us this evening, but she has forwarded the minutes of the last meeting to all councillors. So if anyone has any questions they would like to direct to Councillor Jackson separately, if they've come up with anything after the meeting. Item 7C, meetings and training attended by Scrutiny Committee members. I don't think anyone's attended any training, so we'll move on to item 7D, Community and External Scrutiny Committee Forward Plan. This can be found on page 59 of the agenda, and I just asked the committee to review the forward plan for the next meeting. I'll now bring this meeting to a close. Thank you very much for your attendance.